God of War Ragnarok just came out, but before I started having a total blast with that game, I played God of War 2018. God of War 4 again. Damn it, I hate it when they give two games the same name. First up, visually, this game is absolutely stunning. Holy shit. Didn't know this game takes place in Tsushima as well. The texture work is phenomenal, especially on characters' skins. It is so ridiculously detailed, you can even make out the ashes on Kratos' skin. The lighting is beautiful, the color tones are spot on, and there's just so many minute details packed into everything. God of War 4 does an excellent job at blending realistic graphics with fantastical environments, which makes the art style in the different locations really memorable. There were many times where I wanted to just take in the scenery, man. In terms of performance, on PC the game does have some very occasional micro stuttering, but other than that, it's all good. I can't speak about the PlayStation 5 update for the game since I still can't get a PS5 anywhere, but on PS4 you get a completely rock solid 30 FPS experience. What's also rock solid is my cock when I listen to this game's music. God of War 4 has one of the best soundtracks ever, not just in video games, but in general. There's score that makes you emotional, and then there's tracks that are so masculine they increase your testosterone by at least 30%. The music has this feeling of epicness and scale which is really hard to explain. The sound design overall is just superb, and if you have a home theater system, you will definitely get your money's worth, especially whenever the World Serpent is on screen. Don't get me wrong, I still fucking adore the epic, rageful type of music from the older games, but in these newer games, the music just sounds more purposeful. Speaking of purposeful, let's move on to the gameplay side of things now. Beginning with the combat. When this game was first revealed in 2016, I was as skeptical as a man about to have a baby with his girlfriend who also happens to be a stripper. But boy, was I blown away with the final game. This God of War takes a very different approach from its predecessor's super over-the-top combat and goes for a more personal, up-close feel with the action. For the sake of avoiding any major spoilers, I'll only talk about the weapons you have from the start, and these are the Leviathan Axe and these hands! You can block and parry attacks with the shield, and you can also dodge. The axe does more damage, while the fist or shield attacks fill up the enemy's stun meter faster, allowing you to do awesome finishers like this. The Leviathan Axe can be thrown and recalled at any time, which just never gets old. It's literally one of the most oddly satisfying things I've ever experienced in a game. There's light attacks and heavy attacks which you can mix and match with each other, and with other moves you unlock as well for different combos. There's also runic attacks which can be used to absolutely bully your enemies. Speaking of bullying your enemies, when you defeat enemies, you build up your rage meter, which when completely filled, allows Kratos to unleash the Spartan Rage. The combat overall has just a great amount of depth and is thoughtful with elements like enemy variety, so you're constantly incentivized to discover new combos and ways to take down enemies more efficiently, especially on the higher difficulties. Getting good is very in line with the visual flashiness here, so it feels very rewarding when you keep improving at the game, pulling off different situation-based attacks relentlessly and on the go during frantic fights with a lot of enemies at once. Atreus... Boy! Okay, Boy is also a weapon in his own right as well. You can command him to shoot arrows of different types which are extremely useful in combat as well as necessary for progressing through some areas. You can also unlock upgrades for him that allow him to attack enemies in different ways as well as do stuff like hold them in place to give Kratos an opportunity to strike. He can also resurrect you as well if you die. Like, if I'm being honest, this is probably the best and most well thought out implementation of an AI companion in gaming. It doesn't try to do too much, but what it does do is always helpful. The attacks feel more impactful than ever with the perfect visual and audio sound effect cues mixed with some of the best use of controller vibration in gaming history. Like, seriously, the hit feedback here is just unmatchable. The moves play off of each other seamlessly, opening up an excitingly vast amount of options to create your own attack layers. For example, going from a runic attack to a running strike to a charged attack while spamming Boy's arrows feels so snappy and responsive. The game feel of the action overall is just so satisfying, it almost gives your mother's pussy a run for his money. Now, with all that being said, I do have a few problems with the combat. First things first. The combat doesn't feel as brutal as the previous games, which I know makes more sense for the story and what Kratos has become now, but still, I would have at least loved to see more than a single finisher animation for any particular enemy type. The lack of boss variety. Now the normal enemy variety is okay, but the game is really lacking in boss variety. Other than boss fights with story essential villains, which are awesome by the way, there's like 2 big boss variants in the entire game which are recycled so much they can give an environmental activist a boner. Whoa, a giant! Whoa, a giant but yellow? Let's go, an elemental ancient? Now we're talking. Holy shit, it's the elemental ancient again, but why? God damn. I just wish there were more varied boss fights like this dragon one right here. The difficulty. God of War 4 follows the most basic form of difficulty scaling where enemies take infinitely less damage and deal infinitely more damage than you. This was especially frustrating in the early game where every fight went on for ages, man. I played the game on Give Me a Challenge, which is basically like the hard difficulty of the game, and sometimes this problem got so bad that you can be spending eternities chipping away at the health of an enemy that is only like 1 level higher than you, and then they can just kill you in 1 hit. I'm sorry guys, but did we forget that this is the same god killer that ended an entire pantheon? And when the game fucks with a player like this, it is natural behavior for the player to look for exploits. Look at Mr. Big Recycled Boss here. Can't touch me, can you? But other than these problems, the combat is just incredible and most definitely one of the best in modern gaming. The other part of the gameplay is exploration. Exploration plays a huge role in the game as by exploring levels and defeating enemies, you gain resources and skill points. Holy shit guys, I found premium Bluetooth, but I think it still isn't enough for Kratos to connect with his son. The resources and currency are used for buying and upgrading your gear. You can also slot enchantments into your armors which give you different bonuses. The skill points, as the name might suggest, are used to purchase new skills for Kratos and Atreus in the skill tree. These range from simple damage builders to entire new stances for combat. Almost every skill you buy feels essential and worth it. These RPG progression systems in place here have just the right amount of complexity that allows long-time players to experiment with new builds while still providing an equally satisfying experience to newer players. God of War 4 also follows a semi-open world approach where you can explore various areas and find quests, treasures, etc. You also visit different realms throughout the game, which other than contributing a lot to the visual variety, have their own types of locations and puzzles. And speaking of the puzzles, there's puzzle solving involved with progressing in the quests and opening special types of chests which increase your max health or rage. A lot of the times, puzzles also help with the world building, and they definitely keep getting better as the game progresses and more mechanics are introduced. Now if I'm being honest here, the puzzles and locations are good, but they are nowhere near as awesome and memorable as God of War 2. Like seriously, even if you go and play that game now, some of the puzzles and locations in it are so mind-blowing and iconic they will remain ingrained in your memory for years to come. What will also remain ingrained in your memory is this game's story. God of War 4's story revolves around Kratos' late wife's last wish. The wish was for her ashes to be spread at the highest peak in all the realms by her husband and son. Kratos wants to train and prepare Boy for this journey that lies ahead, but trouble literally comes knocking on their door in the form of Baldur, who's the main villain of the game. This leads into what is probably one of the most epic and hype opening fights in gaming history. Just look at all this violence, man. Something in you really snap. This forces Kratos and Atreus into having to set out on the journey prematurely. But everything is not as simple as it might seem, and Faye's last wish turns out to be way more complicated than expected. The rest is up to you to find out, and I won't spoil anything major. After kill-streaking an entire pantheon, no one was sure what could be done with Kratos' character moving forward. But by some miracle, these madmen made this game turn out to be one of the best and most well-executed shifts in tone for any series in entertainment history. Kratos is a different person now, or at least he tries to be. But the game recognizes the fact that one can never truly escape his past. Atreus is the more human of the two, and in a way he represents the qualities Faye wanted for Kratos. Their father-son relationship is handled so masterfully, it's ridiculous, man.
Do not mistake my silence for lack of grief. Mourn how you wish. Leave me to my own.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize.
No. Why would you?
Bruh, how the f did they manage to make a conversation between a god and his son so relatable? Their emotions are reflected in the gameplay as well. Sonny Suljic gives one of the best child actor performances of the decade as Atreus, and Christopher Judge, that man is Kratos. This Giga Chat's voice is enough to grow hair on a baby's chest.
Watch your tone, boy.
Seeing these two characters work together, help and grow on each other, overcoming various obstacles in their relationship, is just an absolutely joyful experience. And not just these two. Every character in the game is handled with extreme amount of care. Everyone has their own distinct personality and charm to them. As the story goes on, you get to really see these characters evolve gradually. Baldur's motives are understandable and he makes up for an actually imposing threat. When I originally played this game back in the day, I thought that Brock and Sindri were only gonna be here for some comic relief, but they have depth to them as well and have a really wonderful arc that had me smiling year to year. Sometimes I would purposely keep rowing the boat and not go to a quest just so I can get to hear the stories Mimir tells on the boat. And Freya is just...
Welcome to Alfheim, gentlemen.
A few moments later.
Women.
The quest structure still has some of that classic God of War DNA that involves backtracking to certain locations. You never want to stop playing the game as it takes place in a single shot that always transitions seamlessly from gameplay to cutscene, which is ridiculously immersive, and also because the writing here is so unbelievably good that the side quests in God of War 4 have better writing than the main quests of most other AAA games. Every line of dialogue is written and performed to perfection by a team of people that actually have a creative vision. Oh, and the set pieces are still wild as fuck. The game uses the more larger-than-life set pieces more sparingly than the previous games in the series, but when it does use them, it sure as hell makes them count. The holy shit type of epic moments here are so creative and just straight up awe-inspiring. So in conclusion, God of War 4 is a passion project that represents the best part of the gaming industry. It represents what kinds of heights can be achieved when people actually give a shit about what they're creating. As someone who's been a fan of the series since the start, God of War 4 to me is one of the most important pieces of media ever created. All its various components come together to give a respectful, heartfelt and sincere love letter to its characters and to the fans. I laughed, I cried, and I felt every single emotion in between on this beautiful journey that teaches us the value of love, compassion, discipline, and what it means to truly be
better.
It does have some issues as I mentioned earlier in the video, but overall, God of War 4 is a masterpiece in every sense of the word and is a game that I think everyone should experience at least once in their lifetime.